Everyone. Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to do one of the Jejuri poems, Chaitanya. The first two being The Bus and An Old Woman by Arun Kolatkar. These are the three Jejuri poems prescribed for you, and we are going to do the third one. Arun Balakrishna Kolatkar is one of the most important and influential poets in the post-independence Indian poetry. He was born on 1st November 1932 at Kolhapur, Maharashtra. He had his education as a fine artist from J.J. School of Arts, and he worked as an art director and graphic designer in many reputed advertising agencies like Lintas. He wrote in Marathi and English. His Marathi poetry collections include Arun Kolatkarcha Kavita, Chiri Miri 2004, and Bijki Wahi and Drone. His collections of English poems include Jejuri, which was written in 1976, published in, and which won the prestigious Commonwealth Poetry Prize in 77. His other collections of English poetry are Kala Ghoda poems and Sarpavastra in 2004. He won the Kusum Graj Puraskar given by Mahina Bai Pratishthan in 1995. He has also won the prestigious CAG award given in the field of advertising for 6 times and consequently was admitted to the CAG Hall of Fame. Kolatkar's long poem, with which we are mainly concerned, was published in 1976. It is a poetic sequence and it won for him the Commonwealth Prize for Poetry. His small poems are pensive, that is, thoughtful, and most realistic in nature, meditative. The poet Jejuri has been highly acclaimed by critics. Some of Kolatkar's admirers keep it at par with T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. Jejuri is a pilgrim center to the southeast of Pune, and Khandoba is the deity worshipped there. Chaitanya visited this place in the early 16th century. Professor K.R.S. Iyengar writes, Kolatkar describes his visit to Jejuri, reaching it by bus and returning by train. During the interval, Kolatkar goes around, sees the gods, priests, men, animals, and rodents. The poem Jejuri is a very faithful record of his impressions. There are 38 lyrics, but the poet is an uneasy, neutral rice stance. Poets is an stance, and every other stone is a god or his cousin. The temples are in ruins, ill-lighted, the water supply is defective, there are beggars, and the hill ranges dominate the prospect. There is much stirring of the peevish gutter of the just below the surface consciousness, and one receives no light, no exhilarating surprise or surmise. It is all secular and pseudo clinical, and the sequence is not so much a paean of discovery as the proverbial drain inspector's poetic reportage. And yet, Kolatkar has a real mastery of the language, and there is the stir of uneasy life in many of his pieces. As an exercise in cold blooded realism and debunking of a place of pilgrimage, the sequence has perhaps a price tag of its own. The impression left by the temple on the poet has been described along with the scene of the railway station. He describes both the places with realistic similes. Both places suffer from old traditions and superstitions. Both the places suffer isolation, deadly silence, and disease. Towards the end of the poem, there is one lyric which presents great contrast between Jejuri and the railway station. The poet expresses in the poem a satire and lack of reverence. There are very rare moments of pathos only when a begging woman encounters a newly married bride. The three poems prescribed for you, The Bus, An Old Woman, and Chaitanya, are from Jejuri, and now I'm going to read the poem, very small poem, Chaitanya, for you, and then go on to explain it. Chaitanya by Arun Kolatkar. Sweet as grapes, are the stones of Jejuri, said Chaitanya. He popped a stone in his mouth and spat out gods. In this poem, Chaitanya says that the stones of Jejuri are as sweet as grapes. He put a stone in his mouth and spat it out. The stone he spat out broke into pieces, which began to be regarded as gods. The poem entitled Chaitanya is a satire on the blind faith of the Maharashtrians in the legend relating to the temple of god Khandoba. The Maharashtrians genuinely believe that the temple at Jejuri, with its stones and bronze images and statues of not only Khandoba but of several other deities, is a holy place where worship must be offered. According to Chaitanya, the stones at Jejuri are sweet like grapes. Even if a pilgrim puts a stone into his mouth, what he would throw out would not be any seeds but gods. In other words, every other stone at Jejuri has the makings of a large number of gods. Kolatkar has used the weapon of irony to ridicule the blind faith of Maharashtrians who visit Jejuri. The idea in this poem has been attributed to a saint by the name of Chaitanya in order that the idea may appear to be authoritative and therefore credible and valid. Actually, the name of Chaitanya used here is to support and strengthen the idea, deepens the irony. It has nothing to do with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great saint. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the devotee of Lord Krishna, traveled at different places of worship in India. He did not go to Jejuri and is said to have declared about the stones of Jejuri being as sweet as grapes. There may be stories about his having stones in his mouth which turned into gods. There is a matter of faith. However, Kolatkar in his poem Jejuri is clearly expressing irreverence. Professor Narsimhaya says about Kolatkar, his verse tickles the ear and mind by its sheer irreverence, which holds to ridicule the Hindu pantheon of gods. With all due respect to Kolatkar as a poet, I would only say that this is a case of devils quoting scriptures. In the 6 lines of the poem, small poem entitled Chaitanya, is only a part of Kolatkar's larger poem Jejuri. Chaitanya is the name of a saint. It is that saint who is supposed to be speaking in this poem, but the word Chaitanya also means energy, Chetna in Hindi, which perhaps here refers to the creative spirit of man. The poem has 6 lines divided into 2 stanzas of 3 lines each. Chaitanya says that the stones of Jejuri, a pilgrim center near Pune, are very sweet. They are as sweet as grapes. Chaitanya put a stone in his mouth, then he spat it out. The stone that he spat out was broken into many pieces, and energy piece of the stone was a god. Every piece of the stone was a god. The idea is that the stones of Jejuri are so holy that each stone has in it the power and energy to split itself into a large number of gods. Each stone at Jejuri is sacred, pavitra. It can give rise to a number of gods. The poem shows the poet's irreverence towards the temples and gods where people come to worship. In this line, he popped a stone in his mouth and spat out gods, uh, means that the pilgrims to Jejuri believe that every stone lying around the temple is as holy as a god and that every stone can turn into many gods. The brevity of the poem makes it look like an epigram. This much for today. Thank you.